Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Today we are going to do two things. I want to speak about God consciousness, the deep meaning of what it means to be godly. To be God conscious is two things. It is to be conscious, to be aware of God, but also to be conscious through God. And in the process, we'll get quite a good amount of Arabic done because how do we understand an idea? We begin with the word, the meaning, the essence. So in Arabic language, and especially in the Qur'an, one of the most important words which we see is the word of taqwa, this idea. Taqwa. It's very difficult to translate this adequately. There are two possible translations as far as I'm aware. One is the more perhaps classical one is the fear of God. And a more modern one is perhaps God consciousness. You may attach to this simply the word godliness, to be godly. Though in Arabic, this might be better translated perhaps as Rabbani, which is also a word appearing in the Quran. First and foremost, let's get this out of the way with. What does it mean to fear God? To that end, let me actually read out the entry from Webster's dictionary. Webster's 1913 version, abridged dictionary. So, of course, we are not speaking of fear as, what he says, a painful emotion or passion excited by the expectation of evil. No, that's one meaning, perhaps, in the sense that, we fear an earthquake, we fear losing our property, we would fear a murderer, but that is the fear of something bad, whereas that's not what we mean. The fear of God is not the fear of something evil. If God is loving, if God is beautiful, if God is wondrous and merciful, then what does it mean to fear God? So here Webster gives the scriptural definition, where he says, apprehension of incurring or solicitude to avoid God's wrath. And perhaps in Arabic also, that would be the first meaning of this. The most obvious sense meaning would be something like this, because as we shall see, the root meaning of taqwa has something to do with avoiding. And so the most obvious explanation would be to avoid the wrath of God, which is a perfectly true and reasonable explanation of this word. But he proceeds. The trembling and awful reverence felt toward the Supreme Being. Trembling and awful reverence. I think that is a good place to begin for a, where's my screen? For a more poetic, but I also think more spiritual definition. Let's put that up here. So what did he say? I think trembling and awful. Let's spell awful as this, or literally filled with awe, awful reverence. There was also an English philosopher, I believe, he was one of the Cambridge Platonists. He said, describe divinity as a pleasing horror. I think that is right, a pleasing horror. Of course, we mean the very classical definitions of these words. Awful does not, now we say it is awful as it is bad, but that's not the true meaning. Awful comes from the word awe. Something is awful when it is filled with awe, or rather fills you with awe. And in Arabic, azim is a good word for this, I would say. Al-azim, the awful. And horror, let's actually look up the word horror. So going back to Webster's, he says that, well, the root meaning of horror has an idea of shivering. In fact, yes, archaic, a bristling up, a rising into roughness, tumultuous movements. Chapman, in his translation of Homer, says, such fresh horror as you see driven through the wrinkled waves. So horror is an idea of trembling, trembling and shaking. And in fact, there's something beautiful down here. That which excites horror or dread, or is horrible. Right? Again, we mean the very deep classical meanings of these words. And as I said in the previous video, if you want to understand classical ancient Arabic, you must also begin to learn classical and ancient English, or whatever your mother language is. So horror, an idea of let's say, trembling again. Trembling with awe. So that's the meaning of the fear of God. And in that sense, in this classical sense, it is a very good translation of taqwa. But as I said, a more modern translation is perhaps God consciousness. The question now is, where is consciousness coming into this? And let us take it as a given that we accept taqwa as being conscious of God and conscious through God, to be godly, to walk with God, as the Bible says. To walk with God is to walk in the ways of God. Fi sunnatillahi. Now, how do we understand anything? Well, to understand something literally means to stand underneath it. I.e., everything is built up upon some foundation. To understand the thing is to go down to its foundation upon which it rests. And the foundation of all reality is the word, is language, that which God spake to be. So let us begin with this word, taqwa. And this is actually a very good illustration of how the Arabic language works now, which is far more than just, again, learning how the Arabic language works. It is learning the Arabic mindscape. And the Arabic mindscape is not just the mindscape of you or of me. It is the mind, the divine mind itself, the divine mindscape, because it is the Qur'ān Arabi, the Arabiya of the Qur'an, the word of God. So to pursue etymology in the Arabic language is something far, far more than merely learning how words are used in their original connotations. Arabic etymology is the process of going back into the absolute meanings of things. Al-Ma'ani. So first and foremost, taqwa, where is this coming from? Well, this comes from the word ittaqa. 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 This is an alif maqsura. Ittaqa, past tense. Yattaqi. And the masdar, if you remember, the verbal noun is ittiqa'an. Itti, ittiqa'an. Ittiqa. Or also taqwa. Taqwa is also the verbal noun of this. So what is taqwa? Now we know taqwa is the verbal noun of this verb. Ittiqa, like there's the verb to take. The verbal noun is taking. Now the beauty is that when I say taking, it allows me to speak of the idea generally. I'm no longer speaking about, this person taking something, or of myself having taken something, or I am taking it. No, the idea of taking itself, abstracted from each person, from each particular place and time. Using verbal nouns, we can speak about abstract general things. Taqwa. There's actually another verb derived from this, by the way, which is taqiya. Or taqa, yes, I think taqiya yatqa. And taqwa is again the verbal noun of that. But most likely this verb comes from this verb. This is the real root. Ittiqa. And the fa'il, the active participle, the ismul fa'il of this is muttaqi. So we haven't done this just yet. At least if you're following my Arabic videos, if you know Arabic, then you'll know this. But this is the how to form the active participle of from ittaqa. So al-muttaqi huwa man yattaqi. Right? He's the one who yattaqi. Now this word muttaqi, or the plural muttaqun, is one of the most frequent words occurring in the Quran. So it's a very important idea, taqwa. Okay, but still, what does ittiqa mean? We haven't gone into that yet. So now this is where it gets very interesting. We have the basic verb forms, all the way going back to fa'ala, where you have your meaning, your ma'na, which is coming from letters, ultimately. Right, like the fa, ain, and the la. And that comes into this most basic original verb form, fa'ala. The letters here are actually, well, qaf and ya. And the basic verb is waqa. Waqa, yaqi, yaqi. And the verbal noun is wiqaya. So you say waqa, yaqi, wiqaya. The imperative of this would be qi. So I should say first, waqa yaqi means, let's say protect. Most likely we have come across this verb before. I'll give you the example now. If it means protect, then the way to say protect me, the imperative is waqa yaqi anta taqi qi. Right, qi. Qini. Anta qini. Qi. Where does qi, or rather qina, can you think of somewhere where qina occurs? It is actually one of the most famous du'as. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا قنا عذاب النار. Qina, protect us, thou, our Lord. Adab and nar. The adab, punishment or doom of an-nar, adab an-nari. Okay, so if this means protect, then we can kind of see where this is going. Ittiqa has something to do with protection. And therefore, this idea of the fear of God being to avoid the wrath of God, to protect oneself from the wrath of God. That's perhaps like the most obvious meaning of this word. And it's a true meaning. This is the usual etymology, the most obvious one. But we can go far deeper. We will go deeper by actually going deeper into the ma'na of this verb. Protect is a very loose translation. As I said, an Arabic word can never be translated one for one by a mere simple one word, English word, because they come from these roots. The meaning of the waw, the meaning of the qaf, and the meaning of the ya. Now, these two letters, waw and ya, they're the fluid letters. They come and they go. Usually, you can kind of remove them to find the real root, the real underlying root of a verb. So waw and qa, oh, sorry, the waw and the ya, they come and go. The real center of this verb is the qaf. And that's shown actually in the imperative form. The waw and the ya just drop entirely. At some stage, I'll teach you how to make the imperative. But for now, it's just qi. There's no wa, there's no ya, qi. So this qaf, this qi, this is the very center of this word. And therefore, the very center of this meaning. Just check something. Yes, it's all good. So the qaf. Again, I cannot simply give you the meaning of qaf. Ultimately, the meanings of letters, the meaning of alif, lam, mim, is known only to God alone. It is a divine knowledge which God bestows upon his servants whom he will. We pray unto God that he gives us this mystical knowledge of the Arabic letters. Also, we have Surah Al-Qaf, which begins with, again, this one mystical letter, Qaf. But, okay, we cannot give the meaning of it, but it's like light. Pure light in itself is not something we can see. White light, we do not see white light in and of itself. But what we see are the colors, the prismatic dispersion of this white light. If I take a prism, the white light itself we see not, but it comes into this prism and it breaks apart into these many colors. So each letter is a pure light, a light from the light of God. As it shines through the mind, it disperses into its very different colors and modes of manifestations. It is these lights, these colors of the pure light, rather, that we can see. And so over here, we can give some very deep and general meanings of qaf and of any letter. And in fact, these meanings can come directly from the sound of the word. So if you want to begin learning Arabic deeply, you can start right now by paying attention to the sounds of letters. Actually, even by paying attention to the shape of the letters and how they are written. These are modes of communion, of mystical theurgy, of contemplation. So the Prophet ﷺ said, one is rewarded for each letter of the Qur'an, not just each word, but he said that every letter has a reward. Every letter has a reward because every letter is a reward. Because a reward is something precious. It is a treasure. The letter is the treasure, even more precious than the word. So every letter has a deep, mysterious, hidden meaning. From these meanings of qaf, there's the meaning of splitting. And there's the meaning of, related to that, of, I suppose, dividing, but also of being a barrier, therefore. Or let's just say division. So we have shaqqa. Shaqqa means to cleave asunder. We have qata'a. Qata'a. No, qa. Actually, you say cut, even in English, cut. Qata'a. And qat means cut. Because this qaf is sharp. It's sharp. It cuts and so divides in two. Now, this meaning of waqa, yes, it means to protect. But really, what it means is to shield. Wiqaya is something which cuts the space around you into. There's a meaning of cutting and splitting and of dividing. This wiqaya is like a shield around you, which separates you from what is not you. From that meaning of the letters, it informs our understanding of this basic verb, waqayaqi. It is to protect by shielding, by covering. And perhaps this now is actually the deepest meaning of this word, covering. Because the cover splits, it's a barrier between you and outside of you. And it's a barrier which protects you. So let's take this as the deepest meaning of waqayaqi. So waqa is, I covered him. Waqaytuhu. Waqayaqi. Okay, where does ittiqa come into this now? So we have fa'ala. From that, there's a derived pattern. If ta'ala. If ta'ala. This is what is called the middle voice. It's a grammar 101. A voice, the voice of the verb is basically whether it is active, passive, and unless you've studied Greek, you will not have heard of this, but middle, because the middle voice does not come up in English or really any language, apart from very old ancient languages, including Arabic, ancient Greek, Sanskrit. The active voice, what does this mean? Let's see, what do I want to do? I I saw him. I saw him. I am the actor of this verb, the agent. The verb is active because I am the agent, this action, this fi'l. I am the actor of this fi'l, of this action. I am the actor of the action. But I can also say that I was seen. Now there's the verb to see, but I am not the one who is seeing. I was seen. I am the patient. I am on the receiving end. I am receiving the meaning of this action. Let's say I am the passive. I am the passive. Opposite of actor is well patient, agent, patient. Or let's say object. I am the passive object of the action. I'm not doing it. I'm passive. I'm just standing there. I'm doing absolutely nothing. Out of no action of mine own, I am seen. I was seen. So I am passive here. Who saw me? Well, the verb is not telling us that. That's why the verb is passive. The verb is formed for this passive meaning. So an active verb is one where I am doing it. A passive verb is one where it is done to me. Middle voice. Take 3 seconds to guess what the middle voice is. It is, drum roll inserted, both active and passive. It's middle. It's in between them both. So maybe we should actually put it over there, middle voice. What does that mean? Well, again, we don't really have a verb form for this in English. Actually, neither do we in the passive voice. So over here in Arabic, what we say is fa'ala, fa'ala, active. He did. Huwa fa'ala. For the passive voice, there's a way to actually say this without adding other words, right? Going back to what we said about declension, conjugation. The verb itself can change to bring in this meaning of passivity. We say fu'ila, huwa fu'ila. Fa'ala, he did, or huwa, let's say it was done. He did, it was done. Fa'ala, fu'ila. And then you can conjugate the verb as normal. So, huwa fa'ala, hiya fa'alat. Huwa fu'ila, hiya fu'ilat. Anta fu'ilta, anti fu'ilti, and so on and so forth. But we'll do this properly at some stage. Okay, middle. Let's give an example of this. The way we would form the middle voice, again, you can't do it by the verb alone. We have to add other words in English. Let's give this nice example. I washed myself. The meaning of this is that I washed, I saw him, I washed, and was washed. Washing, this verb of washing, I am the one who is doing it. I'm washing myself and also being washed by myself. That's the middle voice. So the doer, or really the person, the pronoun connected to it is middle. So this is about the meaning of the pronoun in relation to the verb. The I, the pronoun of the verb, is the agent of it. The passive, the pronoun I, is receiving the verb seen. Middle, the pronoun I is both doing and receiving the meaning of the verb. Let's do it like this. I saw like that. I was seen like this. I washed 2 arrows like that. In Arabic, the way to form the middle voice, again, hopefully you'd guess that we don't need to add more words. The word itself changes. Watch the previous video I did about declension. I gave an analogy that a word is like, let's say, a cube. The cube has 6 sides, or 6 faces, sorry, even more sides. So another example I give you now is light. You have pure white light, but when it shines through a prism, it disperses into its colors. So a word is a pure light. A word is this shape, a general idea. It has many colors, many faces, many appearances. So this verb fa'ala has many different forms it comes in. Fa'ala is one, the most simple. Another very common one is ifta'ala. This is the pattern. Ifta'ala. So this is the meaning of ifta'ala. That huwa ifta'ala. Huwa fa'ala wa fu'ila. Or something like that, generally. That's what's going on over here. Now, ittiqa. This verb, ittiqa, or ittaqa, as the huwa ittaqa, is the ifta'ala of waqa. So waqa means to cover. اتقى هو اتقى هو وقى هو وقى نفسه ووقي بنفسه. He covered himself. He covered himself. He covered and protected himself. For himself and by himself. That's the root meaning of ittaqa. Let's put that over here. So what we have seen over here is an application of this principle of going through meaning to structure, which we've actually done in multiple stages. As we said, we've gone all the way from the meaning of the letters. Um, let's go in another color. We began with the meanings of the letters, then the meaning of the verb forms, and now finally to this meaning here. Okay, so taqwa has a meaning of covering oneself. But now we come all the way back to this idea of the fear of God and God consciousness. What does this mean to cover oneself or to be on guard, to beware, to shield oneself? Well, this is very deep as it goes into the idea of what is consciousness. I can give an entire lecture series about this. In fact, I've written a book about it, but let's put this here, self-awareness. Being conscious is about being self-aware. Now look at this connection. Self-awareness, hopefully some bells are sparking in your mind and you see being aware of oneself. Wait, if I am self-aware, I am aware of myself, I am aware, but also the one being aware of. So it's actually the middle voice. This idea of self-consciousness, of self-awareness, is the middle voice. So immediately, the structure of this verb, ittaqa, for which taqwa is the verbal noun. Taqwa has this idea of reflexivity. It is the middle voice. Taqwa has a meaning of self-awareness because I can only protect or cover myself if I'm aware of myself. Secondly, why would I cover myself? Let's go back to the Garden of Eden. Why did Adam and Eve cover themselves? It's because they were self-aware of their nudity. We are self-aware. Haya is something very related to this wonderful and deep meaning, haya, which some people translate as shyness, bashfulness. Again, I propose self-awareness is the best meaning, the best translation for haya. Perhaps we'll do another video similar to this about that. So taqwa is about self-awareness, particularly covering oneself, because we have an innate consciousness of the self, some notion of shame, some notion of right and wrong, some notion that if we are naked, we feel extremely, acutely aware of our nakedness, and we need to cover it. Not because nudity is inherently bad. That's not necessarily the meaning. We're not saying that, there's an original sin, that we have something fundamentally shameful about ourselves, that we must cover up our evil. No, it doesn't mean, in fact, it's the opposite. If you have something extremely precious, you don't leave it out in the open. You don't just leave a diamond lying out in the open, or a pearl or a ruby. It's embedded, engraved, protected. Even just a gem, you don't really have a gem in itself. The gem is usually encrusted into a bezel. It is embezzled somewhere. It may be a nice silver or gold structure, rings, some necklace. And even that usually is highly precious. You don't just, unless it's a special occasion, you won't just wear it. You'll keep it safe and protected in a box, not just any box, in a highly decorated box, if it's that beautiful. And even that box may be put into another box, and you get the idea. There's an innate idea that what is precious should be covered. It shouldn't just be left out there to be seen. And what is more precious? What is more beautiful? What is more infinite and holy than God Himself? Therefore, God is hidden. And this is the way of God, that that which is infinite, that which is holy and divine should be hidden. So the deep meaning of taqwa, of self-awareness, of covering oneself, is to cover that which is divine in oneself. Because the spirit of the human being was breathed into him by God. It is the spirit of God which is breathed into the human being. We are entrusted with this spirit. It's not ours. Even to say my spirit, it's not my spirit, it is the spirit of God. I house this spirit. I am the vessel of the spirit, and I am entrusted to protect it. That was the original primordial covenant, the amana, which God gave unto the cosmos, but the cosmos could not handle it. But the human being has borne it. Taqwa is to cover, to protect, to shield what is most sacred and precious and divine in the human being, his spirit. And the way that we cover our bodies is part of that. We cover that which is precious in oneself. We even say the sacral region is one word for one's private parts. It's something sacred, so it must be covered up. And there's an analogy now. Just as we cover those parts of the body which are most vulnerable, most precious, so we cover within ourselves those parts of the soul which are most vulnerable and most precious. And that is taqwa. That process of covering oneself within, of dressing oneself with the most beautiful garments and robes, the spiritual garment. So to house this most divine thing, that is taqwa. That is godliness. Because this self-awareness, this awareness of the self, is the awareness of God. As the Prophet said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, "Man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabbah." He who knows himself hath known his Lord. Because the secret of the self and the essence of the self is the secret of God, that divinity housed in the side of the self, the ruh. And so this self-consciousness, this taqwa, this consciousness of the self, the deep true self, is the consciousness of God. And that is godliness. That is to be godly. It is God consciousness to be conscious of God, and therefore to be conscious through God. To be conscious through God, because God is the source of our consciousness. The source of our consciousness, the source of our life is the ruh. The consciousness of the ruh, that is life. So we have, over these few pages, drawn up the most consummate, beautiful map and diagram of these meanings which come from the Arabic language herself. It's not my philosophy, not my explanation, not my personal inventions or meditations, but I have done nothing more but to draw out the innate thread work of the Arabic language, to unravel her own mysteries. As I said in, I think, one of the first videos, the Arabic language is an ocean, a divine ocean. We are divers, diving, drowning, becoming bewildered in this infinite ocean of the divine mystery. There's one narration, I suppose, might be a bit weak, but the Prophet said, Rabbi zidni fika tahayyuran, tahayyur, wonder. O Lord, increase me in thee, in wonder, or increase my wonder in thee. That wonder, is that feeling of awe before God, that trembling and awful reverence before the pleasing horror of the divinity. That is taqwa, which fills in the final step of connection, that all of these things over here are one and the same. And with that, I shall end this video here, asking God that He increases us in God consciousness, in godliness, in the fear of Himself, and in our wonder and bewilderment in His infinite mystery.